Yeah, hello everybody. It's a pleasure to be in Hong Kong again. Please, I'm not a native English speaker, so I polish my bad English. Hopefully, at least it means that I'm not speaking too fast. Thank you for the organizers for inviting me. Well, what I learned quite something this today, and one thing is that many things are quite similar everywhere. And for just one example, the insurance question. It was mentioned several times that nuclear power plants are not insured. That's in Germany the thing as well. Somebody calculated what it would mean if the plants would be insured, probably. Then we would pay 40 to 50 times the money we are paying now for the electric energy from nuclear power plants. So nobody would buy it if it would be just insured. Okay, just one hint at the beginning. When I'm talking about Germany, it's mainly West Germany, because you know we had two German states until 1990, and I'm a West German, and I'm mainly, when I talk about the anti-nuclear movement, I'm talking about what happened in West Germany before 1990 and later. Okay, where it all started. You probably know, and we heard it today already, that the 50s, 60s, and early 70s were a time where was really kind of a nuclear euphoria. All political parties in West Europe and the US, I think, as well. Also in the East Bloc, actually, also in the communist world, were very much in favor of nuclear power. It was said that it's a very progressive thing, it's the solution to nearly everything, which is, of course, not true. We will hear about it. And one should know that in Germany, especially, at the beginning of the nuclear power program was the will of the political elite of West Germany to get nuclear arms. That's what nobody talked about. But having nuclear power plants was the preconditioning for being able to become a nuclear power, a nuclear weapons power. And actually Germany, West Germany, I would say, West Germany was, I'd say, one of the countries who contributed a lot for proliferation. For example, in Argentina, in Israel, as far as I know, in South Africa, and I think in Pakistan as well. There were German technology, German engineers. In Argentina, it were Nazi engineers, actually, who helped to develop nuclear weapons. And that was related to the so-called civil program. Okay, but while all parties, also the working class parties, also the trade unions were very much in favor. Many citizens were not so much, actually, at least not when the power plant should be constructed in their neighborhood. So where it all started in West Germany was the small village of Wiel. It's here on the French-German border. And already in 1972, there were plans to build a nuclear power plant there, and we had the first manifestations against it, which were from the beginning a French-German demonstration. It was an international cooperation across the border. They had common committees, which is actually not so difficult for them because on both sides of the border they speak more or less the same dialect. And then there were about 60,000 people appealing against the construction, but despite all of that, construction started in early of 1975. That was in February 1975, and 2 weeks later there was a huge manifestation, huge for that time. Then 28,000 people gathered at the construction site, which were not really fortified then. And then maybe it was because of the French participation. I mean, Germans are sometimes a little bit reluctant and not so militant. The people just went on the construction site and occupied it. And the police just retreated. So, and then this construction site was occupied for months, for several months. But people organized themselves there. They organized a kind of a grassroots university. And that was something like the spark, this, which ignited really the movement in West Germany. We will see soon that the police never again was so peaceful in those times. So then after Wheel, actually just one word about Wheel. That was the most successful resistance actually. Wheel was never constructed. There's no nuclear power plant there. The people stayed there for several months. Then they had an agreement with the state government, which is the, Germany is divided in federal states. Agreement with the state government that they will retreat and that they have negotiations, and then they went into court and so on. And they, at the end, they could really prevent the construction there. So after we had a string of mobilizations at different sites where nuclear power plants or nuclear factories were going to be built. One very important example is Brockdorf, which is up in the north there, actually close to my hometown, and there my political socialization started. When I was 14, I was among those people demonstrating here. You see here, well, this is police, it's not demonstrate, but well, somewhere I think that, yeah, that maybe there are. So, but well, the other side, the state had learned from Wheel. They started to really to fortify the construction sites, and we had some very severe militant battles at the construction sites, maybe more or less similar what was then in Narita in Japan. You probably know that site near Tokyo, where now it's an international airport. There were for several years very militant fights there because the people didn't like that airport. Okay, we had this this militant phase actually helped a lot to make nuclear power a big issue. That it means in a way that it was discussed in society, that the people were not looking away, but everybody was more or less discussing it and was somehow forced to have an opinion on that. So things developed, and of course this militancy or having these fierce battles with the police was always an issue in the movement. Should we be so militant, or should we try more peaceful actions of civil disobedience? Then in 1980, it went on in Gorleben. This red line, by the way, is the former border, inner German border. And up there, right on the border, this was then a very remote corner. Very, very remote corner in West German terms. So the conservative government of Nether Saxony thought, well, these farmers there, they are so backward, we just bring them nuclear, what's that? A storage place for nuclear waste and a reprocessing plant, and we can all build that, the farmers won't say anything. Well, they were wrong. The farmers, there were farmers protested, and there were a lot of people coming from Berlin, actually from Hamburg and from other parts of West Germany, and this became one of the very important focus point of the anti-nuclear movement in Germany. And again, the people managed to occupy the construction site for several months and started the progress of organizing, having grassroots universities and stuff like that, inform each other. And then the government in Hanover and Nether Saxony decided, well, we can't build a reprocessing plant there. So that was scrapped. But what they built was a temporary storage place for a high level of radioactive waste, which is there. And why you probably know this place, because each time when a radioactive waste now is coming from France, it's going there, and each time there are huge manifestations, like 10 or 20,000 people coming to Golding. And they are still, and it's still an open question whether we will have there a permanent storage place for a high level waste. So actually, while in the 80s the movement was slowing down, and in the early 90s as well, Golding has always been something like where the remnants of the firework had of the movement, if you understand this picture. So I mean, there was always something going on, and people there were very organized, and they played an important role in the whole movement. Okay, and this brought us to some successes. Of course, there were nuclear power plants built. I think about 20, 21, something like that were built. But if we wouldn't have this strong anti-nuclear movement, we would have a situation in Germany now as we have in France, where 54 or something like that, 56 nuclear power plants are running now, and they depend to something like 80% on nuclear power, which we don't in Germany. So we could prevent the construction of some nuclear power plants. There were some which were not constructed, there were some which were about finished but then not started. There are two power plants that actually were just shut down only after 1 year of operation. We could prevent the reprocessing plant, which is a very important step in the nuclear power program. And the fast breeder, which is another thing, in the fast breeder you produce plutonium. We've heard this morning about how dangerous plutonium is. The fast breeder was built, but now it's a theme park. It never started. It's just like something like a Disneyland. Yeah, and talking about renaissance of the nuclear energy, I think from the West European perspective, this is just propaganda. Because in Germany, the last nuclear power plant started, the construction of the nuclear power plant started in 1982. And after this, it's just not thinkable that they would try to build another one. There's one in France under construction, which is very much delayed. There's another one in Finland, which is even more delayed. And compare that to what was built in the 70s and 80s, where dozens and dozens of nuclear power plants were built in West Europe. Okay, finally, the Green Party get into government in '98, and forget most of this program actually started the first war since 1945 and so on. But at least as they have their roots in the anti-nuclear movement, they had to come out with something like a success. So they convinced the Social Democrats and the big four electric corporations which are running the nuclear power plants in Germany, to have a deal, a kind of phasing out. So we had a contract, an agreement with the industry, and then there was a phasing out bill decided by the parliament in 2001. And this bill meant more or less that the last nuclear power plant would have been shut down in 21, 22, something like that. There were not really dates in it, but it was said an amount of electricity for each plant to be produced. Am I talking too fast? No. Okay. But the corporations, they had agreed, but they just waited for another chance. So they pursued it, the conservatives and the liberals, to make it their program to revoke the phasing out bill. And although they made it not a big issue in the election campaign of 2009, of course people know what they are going to do, what they would do. So we had quite a big or quite huge mobilizations 1 year before the election. No, not that. That's not true. Several weeks before the election, and then again 1 year later in 2010, when the government came out finally with the plans to revoke the phasing out. That was just half a year before Fukushima. So they had some ridiculous studies done saying that we need nuclear power as a bridging technology until there is not renewable. That was really fancy work they did. Actually, everybody who had some idea about energy policy understood quite well that it is just nonsense. And people in the street actually understood as well. So to make it different from the 70s, when we were a big and militant minority, you could now say that the majority of German citizens just don't want nuclear power plants. Also, the majority actually of the conservatives led the race. So that's a very clear thing. So, but the government thought, well, let them protest in the streets. They will forget. So that works. Usually, that works in Germany. Okay, we have some big manifestations for several weeks, and then okay. So they went on, and actually the phasing out bill was revoked, and it was something like they extended the lifespan of the nuclear power plants far into the 1930s. And the big four corporations, which is a kind of an oligopoly in Germany, were very happy. But then there was the 11th of March 2011, and Fukushima accident happened, and just all of a sudden there were huge protests all over in Germany. There were several hundred cities all over the country where we had weekly manifestations, and just 2 weeks after the accident, we had on 26th of March probably the biggest ever manifestation against nuclear power in Germany in 4 cities. In 250,000 people went out in Berlin, Hamburg, Cologne, and Munich. As you all know, then the government made really a turnaround, and that I don't know what you know about the German government, but don't think that they are now anti-nuclear, not at all. I mean, our Chancellor, Angela Merkel, when she was an environmental minister in the 1990s, and She went in '95 to a UN conference in Jakarta. Then was still Suharto ruling there, which was a good friend of our then Chancellor Kohl, actually. You know, Suharto was one of the most brutal dictators in the second half of the last century. So what she did, she should discuss about biological diversity there. What she did was a touring around the country to make PR for German nuclear technology, because then Indonesia was very fond of building nuclear power plants. And you know that Indonesia is an island arc with a lot of tectonics, just like Taiwan or Japan. So she wanted to sell German nuclear power plants to build it on in the earthquake regions. That's Angela Merkel. Anyhow, but she really likes to be chancellor. So she said, well, there's really something ongoing in the population. People were already worried about the economic crisis, about wages, which are dropping in Germany for more than 10 years now, and they were very much against nuclear power. And she really she fears that her government would just be toppled, which would have been the first time since 1945. But so she made a turnaround, and what she made was more or less to reinstall the phasing out bill, which we had before. So that's it. I mean, there was nothing really revolutionary. She just got back to the state we had before. So this is the list of the 8 nuclear power plants which were shut immediately. You can see here that they were all quite old already, and with the exception of Krümmel, it started only in 1984, but Krümmel was not running for 3 years then, I think. Also another one which was shut, Brunsbüttel, was effectively not running for 3 or more than 3 years then. And this is the list of the 9 nuclear power plants which are still running. You must not read all the numbers. Just notice here that most of them have very late dates. So it's about another 10 years where we can try maybe the same game we had already 2 years ago. Maybe we forget in the next 5 years so what happens. So who knows? So what were the ingredients of some successes we had? Well, I think at the beginning, and was most important that we really developed our own expertise. That we cooperated with the critical scientists, and actually some of us became scientists themselves. I had some friends when I was young. They just went studying physics because they came out of the anti-nuclear movement. Very important too was, especially after the Chernobyl accident, was that we made own measurements, that we had independent data and could tell, look here in, for example, in Bavaria, it's very contaminated. So you can't eat mushrooms from the forest, for example. You can't eat wild. So that was very clear. And because we published the data, the government had no way to suppress. So that was very important point. Then it was important that well, the campaign was not centralized, but very decentralized. We had everywhere local groups, and especially those groups at some of the regions where nuclear power plants were built, or as even run now, were very important. And we didn't rely on parties. So the Greens came out of the movement, that is true, but the Green Party is by no way controlling the anti-nuclear movement. So, and then, I think I have to be a little bit quicker. Then strong local roots played also a role. I told that already about Gordon. Okay, let me come to the next point. The alternatives, how the electricity will be produced. Let me first talk a little bit about one of the myths of the nuclear industry. They're telling us that nuclear power is the solution for our energy problems, but it's not at all true, because uranium is not endless. I mean, this graphic shows the colored areas is the amount of uranium produced, and the black line is the uranium used. And we see here that since the early 1990s, more uranium is used in the power plants than is mined. So what they are doing now is using up all the stockpiles built here, but these stockpiles are going to run out sometimes after 2017 to 2018. What they are also using are old nuclear warheads from the Soviet Union, especially. Up to now, 1/6 of the uranium, of 1/6 of this, something like this, yeah, is coming from these old nuclear weapons. But the contract ruling this is running out next year. So the question is, what will happen here? And you can maybe you know the peak oil discussion. You see, we have peak uranium long time before already, and if you look at the resources we have in the world, then you see that uranium at the nowadays rate of using up the uranium, it will last for another 40, maybe 50 years, maybe only 30 years. So there's just no uranium for a nuclear renaissance. But there's obviously enough to make life for a lot of people here, as we heard today. Yeah? Okay, then I was asked, I was actually a little bit astonished about the question, because this is one of the myths we hear in Germany a lot, that when we close all our nuclear power plants, now we will have nuclear electricity from France. So this myth already made it up to Hong Kong, obviously, which is a little bit astonishing for me. The background of this myth is what is going on in the electricity exchange in Europe. You should first notice that Europe is much smaller than China, for example. So that means countries are very close to each other, and it's a quite normal thing that there is exchange of electric energy crossing the border. It's just an open and liberalized market. That's actually what the neoliberals want, that we exchange a lot of electricity here, for example. So we're getting, these are the numbers from last year up to the first 11 months of last year. Actually, we got in the end, we get in that time a lot of electricity from France. But at the same time, much went to Austria, much went to Switzerland and to the Netherlands. And if you calculate the balance sheet, then you see that Germany is exporting electric energy. Even although we have shut down 8 of our nuclear power plants, we are still exporting electric energy. And well, now this troublemaker has gone. I could tell him something about wind energy. Because early in December, we had an incident, how to say, I mean, electricity production is a little bit complicated. You need sometimes when you need backups. If you have a huge nuclear power plant, of course you need a backup for that if it's failing. So, and this backup energy is usually very expensive. So we had an incident when the backup had to be run in early December. But it turned out, and then they said, oh, you see, well, there's too much wind energy, and we couldn't bring all the wind energy from the north to the south, and that's our problems with the renewable. The truth was that the Energy Corporation had sold in advance the wind electricity already to Italy. And then all of a sudden a nuclear power plant in Bavaria failed for several hours. So, and then they had to decide either we take our own wind energy and don't sell it to Italy and pay a lot of penalty, or we will ask for the backup. And they decided for the backup, and then afterwards they tried to make a propaganda out of it because it was renewable. Well, similar thing happened actually several weeks later, early in February, when it was very cold in Western Europe, and you know that in France they heat a lot with electricity, which is like we used to say, it's like opening an egg with a sledgehammer. Because it's the most stupid thing you can imagine, heating with electricity. It's a lot of waste of energy. Okay, well anyhow, they heat with electricity because yeah, I have to be short. Oh, okay. Well, to make it short, the story, actually all the nuclear power plants couldn't produce enough, so they had to import a lot of electricity from Germany. And that was on these days, it was very sunny days, cold sunny days, and the solar panels in Germany were working very well on that day. So I make it now very quick. That's how electricity is produced in Germany. Just look at this and this. In 1999, the power was about 27% of the total production. The climax was around 2000, and then it declined. And you look here at renewable. We started from 3.6%, mainly hydropower, and then more and more windmills were built. And in the last years, a lot of solar panels came also. And now last year we had been at 21%. And okay. So, and just to show you, this is over the time the amount of renewable energy. This is about 20% of the German consumption now of electric energy. 20% which is by renewable. And you see how fast it is growing. In the last years especially, photovoltaic is growing very much. This is wind energy, which is also more or less steadily growing. There were some bad wind years here actually. There was more construction ongoing, but too less wind. This is hydropower, mainly constant. This is biomass. There's a lot of biogas in there. That's the last picture. So, but the battle is not over. Right now, the German government is trying to cut the incentives for solar energy, and they do it in a way really to break the industry. I mean, they could phase it down slowly, which is actually in the in the bills we have for renewable that the incentives are going down slowly, but they really want to make a big step, and that would mean that solar energy would really have a problem. To conclude, the struggle is not over. The renewable sector is expanding very fast, but energy corporation and government try to hamper its development. We still have no secure permanent nuclear waste storage, and we should not forget talking about cheap nuclear energy. We will roughly pay another 100 billion euros for cleaning up all nuclear waste and nuclear pollutants. 100 billion euros, that's roughly about 1 trillion Hong Kong dollars.